still stuck to the bat, obviously. So we are going to start by trimming it right side up. And I'm going to start here with just this little trimming tool. I'm just going to roll it over that rim. I want this rounded out a little bit to make it a nice drinking surface. And I'm going to come right in here and make this curve more interesting. Then I'll drop to this transition line, clean it up a little. And I'm going to roll this down to that line. Now, I added 2 lines on this the other day, but I did not differentiate this. I did not make it stick out beyond the rest of the clay, but I can do that now during trimming by taking clay away here and then taking away clay here. This now looks like a belt. How fun is that? Okay, so now I'm going to take some of this clay off. I don't need it. I don't think a flared foot would do a mug any benefit, so definitely not this one. So I'm just changing my angles here. In a little bit to cut in, straight, and then in again the other way. All right. And to me, that is it on that. If there's any roughness here in some of these lines, you can take a sponge. Just don't use a lot of water. Just a little bit will do the trick. You can do that up on the rim too to really make that nice and smooth. Now this guy needs a handle, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that for you now, but I'm going to pull the camera back first. And this guy's going to need a handle. So I took a chunk of clay I used a minute ago for securing a pot to trim it. And I'm going to take this chunk and I'm going to just roll it out to start with, just a little bit. And as I roll, I let my fingers get wider. I'm just making it taper out a little bit. This is more clay than I'm going to need, a lot more, but that's okay. Take a chunk of that off. And I think I'll start with this. So I'm going to get it super wet and get my hand super wet. And then I'm going to pull with my thumb. My fingers are up around the back and I pull with my thumb. So it looks like this. Pulling with my thumb. And then I rotate my hand. And then I squeeze tighter as I come down. So that squeeze just gets tighter as it comes down. Squeezes in, pinches in. Now here's the trick. Make sure your hand, the clay, is wet. Any drag and I'm going to start tearing this off. But as long as it's really wet, there we go. There we go. We're starting to get there. What I like about these pulled handles is that they taper versus something extruded, which is the same all the way through. And some people may prefer the other, and that's great too. But this is the look I like. This is old school. Okay, so this feels ready. What I'm going to do is set it up like this to dry for the next 20 minutes, and then I'm going to attach it. So I set it up like that so it keeps that nice curve as it dries. Oh, that's perfect. Just a little bit stiff. So here we've got our mug. And I think on this guy, I'm probably going to go from right here down to here. But let's take a look and see what makes sense. I tend to cut off more than I'm going to need to start with, because you can't add it back on, but you can take it away. Okay, so that is definitely too much. Let's see how that looks. We're getting there. I'm going to take a little bit off this end and curl it up just a little bit to start with, so it's out of the way. Now you have a few choices here on attachment. You can try to go straight in, and there are potters that do that quite well. Generally, I roll it over slightly. It's a little bit more old school, and it just gives you a little bit more surface. So what I'll do is I will shave this down just like this. So I have all of this to work with now as my attachment. It's just a little bit more, but it'll make a big difference. So I scratch it up. And I'm going to come back to my pot here, and I'm going to scratch up where I want to attach it. Now I can tell as I scratch that this is a little bit dried out, and that's common up here. Good reason to have that little bit of extra. I'm going to take my slop, which is just everything, all the scraps end up in here along with some of the water, because you end up with all that nice slip that you make when you're centering and as you're throwing. So I just take a little bit of that. And the first thing I'm going to do actually is just take a little bit of it and touch it right here where I want to attach. I'll scratch it again. I'm just going to give it a minute or two to kind of soak in there a little bit. Wet that clay down. Now one of the things I could have done is I could have taken a damp towel, rag, wrapped it around with just, a little bit of moisture in it, and just wrap it around to keep this a little bit moisture up here, and that would have been a good idea. But this is going to work just fine. We're going to dip into this. I usually throw with a mirror in front of me, which is great because I can see everything that I've set down on the table in front of me. Okay, so I've got this nice and scratched up and wet. I have this nice and scratched up and wet. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it in. And then I'm going to take my thumb. Try not to block you with my other hand. I'm pushing in and down. Now I'm going to come along here. Now I'm not worried about the mess here. This would be easy to clean up at any point. I can wait a couple hours and come back and do that. I'm really just worried about getting a good push into the clay. Okay. Okay. And now we have to get the bottom on there. I think I'm going to make this just a little bit more angled for you. And the first thing I have to do is make sure that this is straight. not leaning off to one side or the other, which is hard to do when I'm trying to turn it so you can see it. So I'm going to do it this way first. And go ahead and make my marks. Scratch up a little bit. Scratch up a little bit, just like I did before. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this. This pot, this mug is a little bit dry. It would have been good to have it wrapped up just a little bit better. I don't actually make very many mugs at all anymore. And by very many, I mean really pretty much ever except for demos. Okay. I'm trying to work off to the side here so that you can see better, but normally this would be facing me so I could see what was going on. Hopefully I got that on there straight. And now I'll come back with my needle and I'll just kind of ever so gently. And again, I don't need to worry too much about this. I'll do what comes easy, but I don't need to work it too hard because when this stiffens up a little bit, it dries, this tool will be really effective to just shave off anything I don't like. I can even use a sponge to take it off, and that will work well too. And I will clean up this part at the very end too. Now this mug still hasn't popped off, but it's going to in the next few hours. And after it does, I will turn it over and I will trim the bottom. And at that point, I'll also spend a little time working on this. Now, if this droops a little bit more than you want, remember that you could take like a paper towel and stuff it in here to help hold it. Maybe you want to change the angle. Maybe you want it to look a little bit more like this, which on this piece I think would look pretty good. And you can either prop up clay underneath to lift it where you need it to be lifted, or you can stuff it with paper if you need to, and those both work really good. You know, we're just trying to set it up to dry better in the shape that we want, and it will dry pretty quickly. In a few minutes this will be stiff enough to remove this chunk. Particularly today, it's quite hot today. Okay, so that is our mug. Only thing left to trim in this demo is I'm still waiting for this guy to come free. Once he pops off, I'm going to turn him over in a chuck and trim him, and then we'll be done with this one. All right. Hope that's been helpful so far. I'll be back in a bit. We threw it. We trimmed it right side up, and then we ended the handle. Now the handle needs to be cleaned up. This still needs to be sponged. Needs to be cleaned up around these edges. And the bottom needs to be trimmed out. Now this I took all the way down to the foot. I don't want it to go quite that far down. So the first thing I need to do is actually take a little bit away. And I'm just going to use this real sharp little blade. Run it across here. The reason I don't want it to the bottom is because I need to trim down here. So I need a little bit of a gap. And I really should have caught that yesterday. After I put the handle on, I should have come back and checked on it an hour or two later when it was still soft. And I could have easily just scraped this clay away. But since I didn't, now I kind of have to grind it off, shave it off. This tool is quite sharp. Okay. And you can see all the sloppiness. And again, don't worry, we're going to take that off with the sponge at the end. There we go. Okay. Now, if we had put the handle high enough that it was over the top of this guy, it would be hard to set this turned over. But I think that I was careful enough to make sure that didn't happen. Let's find out. Yeah, so there's just a fraction of space underneath the handle here, between the handle and the wheel head. So that's perfect. So that means, just like when we trimmed the bowl directly on the wheel, we're going to do it exactly the same way. I'm going to start by checking the gap. We're going to move it away slightly. You're going to find this visually more difficult because of the fact that the handle's on there, and it's going to throw you off a little bit visually. Or at least I do. There we go. We're getting closer. And I'm just looking for that spot where it gets the closest to me, and then I give it a little push away. I try to push it a little bit less far each time. We're getting close now. Just barely moved it that time. Barely gonna move it. That I like. That's good. So we're going to take these chunks, be careful of the handle. And make sure your chunks have some moisture in them. Okay, that should hold it pretty good. Now I have to be careful knowing that the handle's here and that I don't put my hand anywhere where it's going to catch that handle, or else we're going to break the piece. This time I think we'll use this guy. It's the next size up from the one I used before. And I'm going to start right on this edge. And I have to be very careful. Look as this comes around. This is as much room as I have, so I have to be careful not to go beyond this point. I start right on that edge. Then I go a little bit lower. Then I'm going to put a finger on the top here, holding it down. I'm going to drive the corner in, just like before. And now I'm going to go to the middle and work my way out. And as that tool moves out, I move my finger in to push down. That little bit of pressure holding a pot down makes a huge difference on whether or not it'll stay put or whether it'll take off on you. Even with those chunks of clay, I like that extra little security. And why not? That hand's got nothing else to do, right? Particularly with this one, because it's got the handle, so that centrifugal force is really going to get messed with by that handle. It's really going to want to pull off. I mean, not the handle pull off the pot, but the whole pot is going to want to take off here. Okay. Now, I can take this down a little bit more. I can dig the foot out a little bit more. That's just whatever your preference is, whatever you're looking for. The truth is, if you leave a pot on until it pops free, just like I did with this one, then it's perfectly flat on the bottom. So if you threw it thin, always leave it stuck to the bat. Don't wire underneath. let it pop off, and then you could just sponge the bottom and sign it. You don't have to dig a foot at all. If you left a lot of clay, then you're definitely going to want to turn it over and trim that out just to make the piece a little bit lighter. Okay. So the only thing left for me to do is to take these pots that I made as part of these beginner throw demos, and I'm just going to sponge them, clean them up a little bit with the sponge, and then send them through the firing. But very happy with all 4 of these. All right, once again, I hope that helped.